Hi, everyone. Good evening, and thank you very much for being here in such a rainy day. I wasn't sure if I'm going to be the only one or very few, but thank God we are blessed with many participants. So thank you for joining us. We have covered a large part of chapter 9. Just a very quick summary of what is discussed until now in chapter 9. A, the location of the animal soul is in the left part of the heart. Why is it in the left part? Because that's the part, in Kabbalistic terminology, it's called filled with blood. Today, doctors will tell you there is blood in the right and left side, but the left side has blood with oxygen that's spread to the entire body. The godly soul is located in the brains, in the head, and from there it gets directly to the right side of the heart. And as the case with the animal soul, each one of the souls spread to the entire body, and the desire is to control the entire body. So they are not just found in the heart and the brains, they are found anywhere. However, the source, the location where it starts from, is the heart or the brains. Why is it so important? Because anytime I'm calling in a decision making, if it's motivated by my heart, it's the animal soul, which means most likely it's not appropriate. If it is motivated by the brains, it is the right thing in most cases. Of course, the godly soul wants to control the heart, the emotions, and the animals wants to control the brains, the intellect, to be able to use it to achieve its desires and to get where they want. However, the starting point is what counts. So if I want this tasty food or food, you ask yourself, why do I like it? Is it good for my body? Or it's because it tastes good? If it tastes good, the answer is, I want it because my heart tells me. If it's healthy, it's because my brain tells me that's how I'm going to preserve my life. So anytime a decision is made, or a desire, or a movement, or an act starts from the brains, it's usually the godly soul. Anytime it comes from the heart, it's usually the animal soul. And therefore, our goal is to allow the godly soul to rule. So this is the first part. The second part is there is a constant battle between the animal and the godly soul. It's a zero-sum game. There is no ceasefire. There is no peace. There is no, you take one part, you give me the other part. There is no such thing ever. That's why, and I keep saying to you, the word war in Hebrew is milchama, just like the word bread, lechem. They come from the same root because it's constant and there is no stop. You cannot say I ate bread or I ate food when I was a child, therefore I graduated, I don't need it anymore. It doesn't work like that. Technology can advance as much as you can think, or even unimaginable. Food, consumption of food is going to be continuous, and there is no way to stop it. That's why, by the way, I think I shared with you on many occasions, maybe not, but it's a very important point, and that is most of the commandments for the Jewish people involve food. A holiday is celebrated with food. A special occasion is celebrated with food. You go to a mourner's house, what happens there? Food. You go to a wedding, what happens there? Food. The buffet, the caterer, that's the first thing you're asking. In Israel, I just heard recently that if you have a choice, or either you can attend a wedding of Ashkenazic Jew, or go to visit the mourning house of a Sephardic Jew, run to the mourning house, because the food at the mourner's house in the Sephardi community is 5 times better than the wedding catering at the Ashkenazi community. There is something about food that we all, so more mitzvot are performed through food than any other part of our life. And the reason is because food is constant. You cannot run away from it. God wants us to acknowledge as a God, and he therefore chose food, because you cannot live. If it would be about travel, if it would be about getting dressed, you can choose not to get dressed. If it would be about prayer, you can stop praying. If it would be about action, building a house, helping someone by carrying them across the street, you can choose not to interact and not to do action or other parts. Food, you cannot refrain from eating. You must be eating continuously. And that's the reason most of God's commandments, the majority part of God's commandments, the negative, the prohibitions, and the positive involve food. Directly or indirect, it doesn't matter. The same is about the war with between the animal and godly soul. Is not something of a choice, and it's not conditioned on a place or an age or a family. If my father was a great scholar, I don't have a war. There is no such thing. It is always there, and the war is about everything or nothing. When I am serving God, my entire body is godly. When I allow my animal soul to rule, I am removing God from my life. So that's the second part. The war of control over my body, we call it a small city. In Kabbalah terminology, there is only one king, and those two fighters fight over control of the city. There can be only one king. They will never compromise. They'll never do a ceasefire, even temporarily. There's no such thing. It's either or. And we are able to make the choice whichever way we want it to be. This is the second part. What is now, we're going to talk about the third part, which I believe we started speaking about. And that is, what's the desire of each one once they rule? What do they want? The animal soul desires for the person to enjoy the moment. What is satisfying me now? The doctor said, don't drink because it will affect your health. And I say, but who cares? It's tomorrow. Right now, it makes me happy. It makes me forget about my pain. So we drink. 2 hours later, or 5 days later, or a day later, we regret it. But it came from the animal soul because we did not use our brains. That's why the only creature that faces this type of challenge is human. And that's why the only creature that is body is built where the head is on top of the rest of the body. All the other animals, most of them, the giraffe is an exception, but all the animals the head is flat with the heart because they don't face those challenges between the heart and the brains. We are standing up because the brains is supposed to control the heart. The goal is to be reminded the way we walk, the way we are, as opposed to a zebra, as opposed to a mouse, as opposed to any other creature, where their head and the brain, the head and the heart are on an equal level. The human being, the head is on top of the body. So the animal soul wants to rule the way I speak, the way I act, the way I think. The godly soul wants to rule the way I speak, the way I think, the way I act. A godly person, we call them what? An angel. A godly person is someone who has no ego. The ego is an imaginary creation by the animal soul, and we're not going to speak about the ego today. And therefore, somebody hurt me. Somebody has more than I do. He has a bigger house, he has a nicer car. I can't stand it. Why is she asking for so much help and she's not doing anything I want? There is about the ego, all about what's in it for me. And therefore, if someone has more than I do, or someone is not contributing to the project as much as I do, I get angry. If it's about the godly soul, it's all about you living a good life quality. So causing someone to be happy, even though they misbehave, is also a mitzvah. It's also a way to create a better universe. And it's about, what is my goal? Perhaps my goal is to assist. Perhaps my goal is to contribute twice as much as my partner. And this way, we are able to live a much better life quality. So the godly soul, by the animal kingdom, by the way, doesn't exist. It's only for the human being. We concluded, I believe, where if you look in the commandment to love God, we read the commandment is Ve'ahavta, love God, et Hashem Elokecha, love God, your Lord, bechol, with all your heart, levavcha. Levavcha is heart, because there are two hearts. What do you mean two hearts? We spoke last week. You have the right side of the heart, you have the left side of the heart. Left side of the heart represents the animal soul, right side of the heart represents the godly soul. God wants us to serve God with all your hearts, plural, both. The godly soul does not seek to eradicate the animal soul. We don't want to kill it. We don't want to destroy it. It is very powerful once you convert it, once you change it, then the animal soul will assist the human in serving God. Again, the war is over control. But it's not about getting rid of the animal soul. We don't want to let go of it, to get it out. There are some people, very few, as we'll discover later on, but majority, 99% of the university, it is about giving the animal soul direction, directing the animal soul in a certain way where they are there to serve God. In fact, the animal soul, once it's trained to serve God, it can get the human being to a much greater height than the godly soul can. And we spoke on second chapter, first chapter, about the animal soul source is a far greater than the godly soul. And when you take that animal soul and you convert it to become a much greater, connected to God and serving God, then you end up getting much closer to God to a much higher level. By the way, everything I share with you can be applied in the universe and in the history of Jewish people. That's why you see that those many people who converted to Judaism, like the animal soul, ended up contributing way farther and way more than the Jewish people themselves. You have Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Meir was the author of the Mishnah. He's a son of a convert. Rabbi Akiva is a son of a convert. Onkelos, who translated the Torah in a way that nobody else understood it before, was a Greek, was a Roman nephew of the Roman Empire. Those people were able to move the Jewish people in ways that they themselves could not before. That's why God chose Abraham as the first man to be connected to God, even though his father and mother was very, very far, a great idol worshippers. I'm sure you heard from me the story that Abraham's father had a store. He would sell idols. And selling idols is not just a dealer. He knew how to worship different idols for different needs. And that's how he would connect a person with an idol. And yet his son was the one, that's the first man who recognized God. The same applies in the future generations, where the greatest people, Moses, had to be raised in an Egyptian house to become a leader. Why? Anybody speaking? We are in the bottom of page 145. Accordingly, the evil inclination, that is the lust of the animal soul, must also come to love God. And this too is part of the divine soul's battle plan. The Alter Rebbe now describes the specific level of love of God that accomplishes this. How are you able to reach a level of converting the animal soul to become godly? This transformation of the animal soul's lust to love of God entails rising to attain to the level of Ahava Rabbah, abundant love, a love surpassing even the level of the powerful love, like fiery flashes that was mentioned earlier.
Which page are you in?
Page 146.
46. Thank you.
This level of love is what scripture describes as ahava beta'anugim, a love which experiences delights. It is the experience of delight in godliness that is foretaste of the world to come, since man's reward in the world to come consists of delighting in godliness. I am not going to go into the details because it's very esoteric, very philosophical, but you need to know. When it comes to love of God in particular, there are two levels. One love is after contemplating all that God does for us and all the little that we matter seemingly for God, and yet he loves us so much. That creates a love for God, and we are commanded to have love for God. But that's one level of love. Then comes a much greater level of God. We call it ahava beta'anugim, a delightful love. Imagine you get addicted to something that nothing can stop you. You need that food. You are addicted to that person. You are addicted to a certain book. You must read it. You cannot stop. There is a draw that nothing can stop you. That's the level of love towards God that, if done, will be able to convince the animal soul to turn and love God as well. And the rabbi continues to say, this delight is felt in the brain containing chokhmah, wisdom, and intelligence, which delights in perceiving and knowing God, commensurate with the capacity of one's intelligence and wisdom. The greater one's grasp of godliness, the greatest is delight. And this delight is the level of water and seed, that is, light that is sown in the holiness of the divine soul, which transforms the good and element of water in the animal soul, from which the lust for physical pleasure had previously arisen. So if you have such an addictive connection to God, you are able to convert the animal soul to be in love with God rather to be in love with candies or chocolate or meat. This means that the element of water in the animal soul, which had previously expressed itself as a desire for physical pleasures, now expresses itself as a love of God, having been transformed by the divine soul love of God. I am going to share with you an example. Anybody heard of the story of Rabbi Eliezer Dodaya, Rabbi Elazar ben Dodaya? Nobody? It's a story I like to share during Yom Kippur. There was a man, his name was at first Elazar. He was a person who decides to cohabitate with every woman he can find. Apparently, he had the ability and the financial means. So he tried in the Holy Land in Israel all the women that were willing to sleep with him. But that wasn't enough. He decided to travel across the sea to find women to be intimate with. And once he came to, of course, the ocean, either I think it was Rome or Cyprus, and there was a famous woman, a madam, and he paid her. And as she came into the room, he was wearing a talis, a tzitzit. And she saw the tzitzit. She said to him, "You know the story. You told me the story." Huh? No, that's your father's version. But that's not the Talmud. The Talmud, I remember you told me how your father tells the story, but it's the Talmud tells us. She saw the talis that he was taking out. She says, "What is that?" He says, "Oh, it's a garment that we Jews wear." She says, "So you're Jewish? You're the chosen nation?" He said to her, "Yes." He says, How ashamed you should be that you spend so much money and so much energy in so many days to commit such a low life act when you guys are chosen people that you can connect to God much greater than me and other people. And he said to himself, even this madam who is such a low life can see that my behavior is so wrong. How is it possible I didn't see it until now? Obviously, because the animal soul was ruling and the godly soul was asleep. I think we shared with you, the animal soul will give a sleeping pill to the godly soul and put it to sleep. So it caused him so much pain that he ran away and he took a ship. He traveled back to Israel, and out of the port, he went up on a mountain and he sat on a rock and he put his hand between his legs and he started crying. He cried for how low his soul, his body, his life have been. And he cried and cried and cried until his soul departed the body. When the soul departed the body, an echo came from heaven. Woe to you, Rabbi Elazar. There are a person who can purchase his world to come in 1 hour. In 1 hour, meaning in one move. And the rabbis, of course, buried him as a holy man. The Gemara discusses, where did he get reward? It never done any good. And the Gemara says, but this is reincarnation topic. We're not talking about it. That there is another man that lived just before by name of Yochanan Kohen Gadol. In the Second Holy Temple time, there was a bunch of high priests. One of them was Yochanan Kohen Gadol, who served as a high priest for 80 years. Meaning every year, if there was a sin, one single sin, he would not make it alive during Yom Kippur and the Holy of Holies for 80 years. And then he became a Sadducite. He refused to believe in the oral tradition, only the written tradition. And the people, he died in the temple on Yom Kippur. They had to pull him in chains. Now, because he changed at the end of his life, all that he accumulated was taken away from him. But God doesn't want to waste it. He waited for someone who had not done nothing to his life, and only by the end of his life did such a holy, connected to God on such a high level. So Rabbi Elazar ben Dodaya received the reward that Yochanan Kohen Gadol, Yochanan the high priest, was deserving. That's how he got such great reward. But the point is that by that time, when he realized the animal soul taking over of his life to such a depth that even a low life person can see, and he did not see it, it caused him to rip off all the shells, all the coverings that separated between him and God. And he connected to God into the level of Ava B'Tanugim. And at that point, his soul left his body because he felt that he won't be able to live another hour while the animal soul is running the show. This means that the element of water, okay, we talked about the water. We are moving on to page 147. It is similarly written at Chaim Portal 50, chapter 3. And the authority of the Zohar, that the evil of the animal soul is transformed and become perfect good, like the good inclination itself, when it is stripped of its unclean garments, meaning the mundane pleasures in which it had been clothed. So we don't hate the animal soul. The animal soul is leading us to addiction, to ego, to self-centered, to misbehaving, to acting evil. Yet we don't want to avenge. We don't want to hurt it and kill it. We wanted to re-educate it. We want to be able to take it and direct it in the proper path so that it assists us in serving God rather than just getting rid of it. The Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, consists of a powerful drive, an appetite for whatever it perceives as good and desirable. This drive is neutral and may be steered in any direction. However, being clothed in a corporal body, it inclines towards physical pleasures. These lusts become unclean garments for the animal soul's drive. By steering it away from physical pleasures toward an appreciation of spiritual pleasures, the divine soul strips the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, of its unclean garments, and clothes it in a pure garments, so that it may apply its powerful appetite for pleasures to godly, holy matters. And I should say, I've witnessed many people who have learned about keeping Shabbat, who have learned about studying Torah later in their life, and they enjoy it, and they are a source of jealousy for others who were raised and born that way. Many times I hear it, it's a common perception that a rabbi like myself or some of my kids that were raised that way, it's much easier to keep Shabbat, to keep kosher, to study Torah. However, there are challenges and tests that come up. But for someone who was not raised that way, but later on discovered that, their connection to it, they cherish it in such a great way that, as I said, it's a source of envy for people who are raised that way, because their connection is with the animal soul. They have been to the other side and they saw that it's empty, that it's hollow, and now they connected in something that's very meaningful for them. They enjoy every moment of that process in a much far greater, deeper level of connection to God, meaning that they are able to take their animal soul and make the animal soul desire the study of Torah, make the animal soul desire to keep Shabbat, make the animal soul desire to keep kosher, because they know how powerful it is and how great the connection to God. The rabbi continued. The divine soul further desires that similarly all other emotions of the heart, which are offshoots of fear and love, be dedicated solely to God. And we talked 2 weeks ago about the other emotions. Thus far, the Alter Rebbe has discussed the divine soul's desire for dominion over the mind and heart. He now goes to speak of the other organs of the body, and also the entire faculty of speech that is in the mouth and the thought that is in the mind be filled exclusively with the divine soul's garments of thought and speech. Every facet of the human should be connected to the godly soul, including the speech, including action or thought. Namely, thoughts of God and his Torah, in which he would speak all day, his mouth never ceasing from study, and the faculty of action vested in his hands and the rest of his 248 organs, this faculty being the third of the garments of the divine soul, be engaged in the fulfillment of the mitzvot, that is, that he utilizes the ability to act solely in the observance of mitzvot. So far, we learn about the desire of the godly soul. The war is either or. The godly soul wants to convert, not get rid, to convert the animal soul, to utilize the animal soul powers to connect to God. So the animal soul desire, instead of physical pleasure, more spiritual, mental pleasure of studying, of serving God, of being there for others. Some people enjoy that, and it's very, very meaningful, and therefore they are doing much greater than people who are challenged with that. Now the rabbi is going to talk about the animal soul's desire. In summary, the divine soul desires that its faculties and garments pervade the body entirely and exclusively, but the animal soul derived from klipa desire the very opposite, a desire that the body be pervaded with its faculties and its thought, speech, and action. And therefore, says the Rebbe, but the animal soul desire is for man's benefit, in order that he prevail over her and vanquish her, as in the parable of the harlot related in the Holy Zohar. Let me explain that, and we're going to read it soon. The animal soul is pulling man away from God, to make man not serve God, but serve his ego, to make men speak not appropriately, to cheat and lie. That's the animal soul. Whatever is good makes me feel good, whatever gets me more money, whatever makes people respect me. But the animal soul is not contesting God. The animal soul is not there as some other religion have the belief that God has no control over Satan. Satan is evil, and God cannot control it because Satan caused havoc, and God cannot control it. This is totally unacceptable in Judaism. God created the animal soul for a purpose, and the purpose is that the human being should overcome the animal soul. So the animal soul knows its job. The job is to make it hard on the human being to serve God. But the animal soul itself wishes and desires for men not to obey the animal soul. And here is a story, a parable the Zohar tells us. The Zohar says that there was a king who had a young boy, and he knew that young boy one day will be the king. And he wanted to make sure to test the king, the son, so that when it comes to ethical behaviors, he should know right from wrong. What does he do? He hires a harlot, a woman of the street, and he tells her, I want to make sure my son is an ethical person, and I want to see if he will be able to stand back from connecting with you. And your job is to try as hard as you can to convince him to be with you. And that person, that lady, is going to try very, very hard. She comes to him, she befriends him, she buys him drinks in the bar, she offers to drive him back home. She will do whatever she can to convince him to be with her. Now, if he failed, if the young man end up in bed with that girl, the king realizes that he has a long road to teach the son right from wrong. If he disobey that girl, if he does not do what she wants, the king will be extremely happy. What does the girl want? The woman, she wants the king to be very happy. So deep in her heart, she wishes he does not listen to her. However, if she does not give him the ultimate test, she's not serving the king. She does not follow the king's order. The king's order is to do as hard and as tempting as possible because he wants to test his son. A real test is when it becomes very hard. So again, she's here in a dichotomy. On one hand, she needs to serve the king and obey the king, and there are cameras to show if she does a good job or she tells him the truth. The son doesn't know. She needs to tempt him as hard as she can over and over and over. On the other hand, she knows full well that if she will be successful, then the king will be extremely sad, and it will cause a lot of grief to the king she loves so much. And that's the animal soul, the harlot that is placed within us to try and tempt us to misbehave, to do whatever it makes me feel good. However, when we fail, it's a reflection on us, and God realizes that we need some more education. The animal soul's real deep desire is we don't obey the animal soul. The animal soul will be extremely happy if we said no. And the more we said no, the happier the animal soul is actually. However, the animal soul is not allowed to reflect that or to show it, because otherwise the test is not real. If the test is not real, God is going to turn to the animal soul and says, you're not doing your job. Out, I'll find somebody else. This dichotomy is what the animal soul. So on the godly soul side, the godly soul wants to rule the entire body and convert the animal soul to be desiring spirituality and serving God and beautifying the universe. The animal soul desire is to cause man to think about himself only and what's in it for me and how am I going to benefit from it, and I have to be the one to be the best and the greatest and the highest. But the animal soul deep inside wishes that the person will not obey. Here is the story, the parable. I'm reading the parable. A king desired to test the moral strength of his only son. He had a most charming and clever woman brought before him. Explaining to her the purpose of the test, he ordered her to exert every effort to seduce the crown prince. For the test to be valid, the supposed harlot had to use all her charms and guile without betraying her mission in the slightest way. Any imperfection on our part would mean disobedience and the failure of our mission. However, while she uses all her seductive powers, she inwardly desires that the prince should not succumb to them. So too, in our case, the klipa itself desires that man overcome it and not permit himself to be led astray. The entire stratagem is solely for man's benefit. Now, that's the conclusion of chapter 9. So again, we discovered in this chapter 3 points: the location of the godly and animal soul, the fact that they both fight endlessly each other, and the purpose and the desire for each one. Godly soul wants to convert the animal soul. Animal soul wishes that the men disobey it, but is not allowed to convey it and express it. Animal soul wants to hold the body. Next chapter, the rabbi is going to talk about a human being who allowed himself to win the war, following the godly soul. Chapter 11 is what happened when a person is losing the war, allowing the animal soul to rule. Chapter 12 is the ultimate goal, our discussion for the entire book, the Benoni, the person in the middle, which the book is called the Book of Benoni. So we'll conclude here tonight a little early, and next week, God willing, we'll be studying we'll begin with chapter 10. Thank you so much. Be well, everybody.